Looks like people are slowly trickling in, and I encourage you, if you're here, to think about who inspired you in your youth and why. And please share in the chat box. So again, the prompt question while we're waiting for folks to join is, who inspired you in your youth and why? And it looks like Ruth has responded, my boss, a woman in her 50s who was generous, strong, and business smart. Thanks, Ruth. As just shared, I've always looked up to my parents, as well as many philosophers such as Kant, Cornel West, James Baldwin, although he is considered more a writer in general, as his work spans many genres. Thank you, Kaz. Lana V says, my mother, cousins, and others in my multi-generational household. And Yodit says, growing up, I was inspired by my parents and my teachers. I went to DPS and so many of the teachers and administrators looked like me. That meant a lot. Thanks, Yodit. So for those who are just joining, I see a number of people have just joined. We have a prompt question as we're waiting for people to trickle in. And the question is, who inspired you in your youth and why? And the reason for that question, as you might know, is that we will be featuring some really inspiring youth leaders today. Hi, Tyson. So,
Uh-oh, and on your sound, something happened with your sound there, dear. Dea, one of our speakers, mentioned Angela Rye, this amazing journalist who's been speaking up for the Black community on large media platforms. Others, Pam mentioned her grandmother, provided a tremendous sort of love and knowledge. Shout out to grandparents for sure. Susan mentioned inspired by astronauts. The space program was expanding greatly. I remember that, Susan. And the ability to take risks, to train hard and explore somewhere new was very inspiring. Bianca noted her pastor encouraged her to, their pastor, I beg your pardon, encouraged them to seek mental health counseling to address a challenging childhood, teachers, and others who encouraged me. Jua'Chelle, who's another one of our speakers, had a passion for helping, and in early high school had a teacher, Ms. Purcell, who pushed them to open up their creative dynamic, and that is why they're a part of this Staying Power activist group. Another shout out to grandparents whose hard work and love created a tight-knit family, teachers, friends, and their families. That's great. Thank you for contributing, everyone. You want to just go on, Ananya?
Sure. So we are really honored to have you all here today. As many of you know, this final session in our 5-part series will feature youth leaders, and Yodit offered this really beautiful title, Let Them Lead the Way. And just, if you have any technical issues, you can email info@new.org. I think we can go ahead.
Just want to ask if folks make sure they're on mute. And we'll get started.
Yeah, I think we can go to the next slide.
Great.
Okay, yeah, so just before we dive in, I've observed in a lot of gatherings like this that you're asked to turn your video off, and we actually would invite you to turn your videos on. It really enhances the feeling of being together, which we found really generative in these spaces. So if you're in a space to turn your videos on, we ask that you do that, and please make sure that you're muted at the same time. And then it's helpful, because there are so many spaces in the space, to turn your video on speaker view. That way you can zoom in on the person who's speaking at that time. And then, of course, if any questions come up, you can put them in the chat box and we'll respond. And you can also email me directly, or email info@new.org. And then just to take us through the agenda, which many of you are familiar with at this point, we'll do a little welcoming and grounding in why we're here, and why it's important for us to be together in this moment. And then we'll jump right in to a conversation with our panelists, which will culminate in a set of demands to our community. And then we'll transition into question and answer session, and then we'll do a little bit of wrap up at the end.
I want to just lift up that I know that we're all survey fatigued, but your evaluations as we're thinking about centering justice, which will take a pause over the summer, but as we're thinking about it for the future, we really want to have you help shape that for us. So please take a moment, and we'll allow some time, but if you would, please take a moment to complete the evaluation. So why are we here? It feels like today is even different than the last time we were here. And in a moment, I'll talk us through our norms. But our intention when we started this series, we had noticed that in our urgency to respond to the pandemic, many were moving away from their efforts within their organizations to uplift diversity, equity, and inclusion, and racial justice. And we wanted to insert leaders of color into a conversation about our COVID-19 response. And we wanted to uplift their experiences and stories of moving through a pandemic, because it is unique to the experience that we're having more broadly. We also continue at NEW to strive towards building resiliency and solidarity across our ecosystem, and we believe that begins with relationships. It also, we strive to create a network connectedness so that we are working in interdependence and leaning on one another, not just in a pandemic, but throughout our work, and that we might strengthen one another and our organizations across the ecosystem by creating a space that fosters that connection. And we want to, both as an organization and as a team, to continue to make space for these important conversations and dialogue that needs to happen as we're imagining transformative ways to, I've been quoting Zakiya Harris in the last couple weeks. She said that we are actively hospicing the old and midwifing a new way of being. And in that way, we invite each of you who participate to imagine that future with us, where systems of inequity are dismantled and where we're helping to define that new reality and opportunity. And I don't know that I introduced myself or that you did, Ananya. So before I go into norms, I'd just like to formally welcome all of you and introduce myself. My name is Yodit Mesvin Johnson, and I'm on staff at NEW. And I'm joined here with my inspiration, my muse, Tyson. Ananya?
And I'm Ananya Mayuka, and I am the program coordinator at NEW, and I've enjoyed emailing all of you frequently.
We're just so thankful, Ananya, for the way you help to make this come together each week. So thank you. In terms of norms or our ways of being, obviously moving in a tech environment, my dog is already barking. So we just ask you grace and patience and understanding. Particularly today, we invite children, if you've not already and you have young people in your house, we welcome them to join us for this particular session. We want to encourage deep listening, and not so much listening to find out something to do, but listening to really hear and to allow our hearts to be transformed in that listening. And then to be present as much as you can to minimize the internal chatter that's happening in all of our minds, and to embrace discomfort, particularly this week. And this norm is not on this document, but I also want to speak to particularly Black folks on this call, that it is okay for you to just be with us and not have to do anything, including not engaging in chat or not engaging in dialogue. We're happy that you're here. And I know from my own personal experience that the last couple weeks have been taxing mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And so today we're going to continue to have unresolved feelings and unanswered questions, but this is an invitation to be together in community in this moment for all of the reasons that I think many of us know, but particularly because we share an interest in creating a new way of being. So this being the 5th session of Centering Justice, we really felt like it was important to round out the series with youth leaders here in this community. Before the pandemic hit, many of us were inspired by the organizing efforts of young people in Saline High School, who even before the uprising that we see now in the nation, were uprising to push back on racism and systems of oppression in their schools. We were really inspired then, and we remain inspired by them now. Young people have been at the center of every movement in the history of this country. And so we know that their energy, their passion, their ability to call us on the carpet as adults for the things we've not done to make their way better, has always caused change. And so today we want to make space. We knew as an organization, me as an adult, and many of you I know on this call want to make space for these young people's voices to be heard, and really for their calls to us to compel and propel our work forward. Too often we're making decisions for them without them in the room, and I acknowledge that I too have done that. And so today is trying to model what we hope for the future, that we will invite, as we're embracing a racial difference, that we'll also embrace age difference and invite them in. And this author, Sandra Mucci, who's done a lot of work around youth policy reminds us that rather than standing or speaking for young people, we really need to stand with them and allow them to speak for themselves. We don't need a political movement for them. We actually need to build environments and policies for our collective future with them. So I'm just so grateful to these amazing young leaders in our community, Dea, Mia, Miguel, Jua'Chelle, Sunny, and Kaz, who are gonna come before us, and I'll invite them to introduce themselves. And the prompt question, beginning with Dea, is how would you describe yourself and your activism work, and what brought you to it? And if you each would just take a minute or two, we'd love to hear from you. I think we've decided we're gonna go off the slide deck. Is that right, Ananya, so folks can see them?
Yeah, why not? Maybe actually for the intro part, we can keep it up and then.
Got you. Okay, so Dea, if you want to come off of mute, and
Yes.
how would you describe yourself? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dea Chappell, and I would describe myself as a youth activist and a spoken word poet. So, like my first encounter with activism, I would say would be the Trayvon Martin case back in 2012. I was only 12 years old at the time, and I was one of those kids to take a picture with my hoodie on and my fist up and put it on Facebook. And you know, back then, that's really what opened my eyes to see that racism is still truly prevalent in this country. And yeah, I was a 12-year-old, so just simmer on that. And yeah.
Thank you, Dea. Again, I'm really happy you're here with us. Mia, how would you describe yourself and your activism?
Well, I would describe myself as, she said open word, but I mostly write it down into poems. And I must say my first experience with it was in about 3rd grade. For just with something as simple as walking to a after-school program, I got into an argument with a student who was white, and in their argument for it, they thought it was right to say that, well, at least I'm not black. And when they said that, it really hurt my feelings, and that really made me think about it, over what I could do to stop people from making comments like that.
Thank you, Mia. Miguel?
Hi, I'm Miguel. I'm a rising sophomore at Yale University. A lot of my activism is centered around trying to build a community within the university and the student body. So I'm outreach coordinator for the umbrella LGBTQ organization at Yale, student organization. I'm community action committee chair for Black Students Alliance at Yale. And I'm also involved in a bunch of different programs to try to integrate and create a more unified community between Yale students and the New Haven community. And then I'm this summer, like everybody else, trapped in my house. But I reached out to UOD to try to figure out ways that I can be helpful to my community, even if I can't leave my house.
Yeah, I'm excited to work with you, Miguel. Thank you for being with us. Jua'Chelle?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jua'Chelle. I'm an athletic that lives in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And my activism comes from poetry and similar to Mia. Can you guys hear me?
You're breaking up a little bit, Jua'Chelle. You are breaking up a little bit.
I am. Can you guys? Okay. Can you guys hear me now? Just opening up.
Yeah, it's breaking up.
Okay. Can we pass it on to someone else?
Yep, let's go to Sunny and then we'll come back, okay?
Hi, I'm a student activist and a member of the Society for Student Resistance, which is it's a small group of like students of color and basically students who stand against racism. And so my family are immigrants from South Korea, and I started my activist work like beginning of this school year. Um, And our school had a heartbreaking journey for students of color. And since I moved here last year, everything was very frustrating and heartbreaking and shocking for me to deal with. And so I reached out to a fellow student, and she introduced me to teacher Matt Hamilton. I think he's in the call at Saline High School. And that's when we formed this organization called Society for Student Resistance, and that's how I started my activist work.
Yeah, thank you for shouting out Matt Hamilton, who's amazing. Kaz, I'm gonna go to you and then we'll come back to Jua'Chelle.
Hey, can you guys hear me all right? Okay, so I got involved. So it's just really just been a thing that runs in my family. I've had family members who have been on the news after being shot by police. I personally had a lot of police encounters. My mother comes from a country that was formerly in the Soviet Union, and so she left that country. She left Poland to come to the United States. And I was just having a conversation with her a few days ago, and she was talking about how she's really sorry that she escaped one authoritarian regime to come to another. And so I think that, I mean, that's something, my bicultural family has always been something that has prompted me to look at different sides of different arguments and understand that, you know, this is a worldwide struggle. And, you know, for some it's race, for others it's class. But abuse of power leads to police brutality. And so when police are militarized and they have so much power and so many resources to get away with these things, they will, in fact, take advantage of that and use it and use the system. And so that's what got me involved in social justice and the movement, the anti-policing movement in general. And I've worked on the Police Oversight Commission, as well as I was on a panel for selecting new, I believe, new prosecutors for the city of Ann Arbor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I believe that's what the panel was for. I can't recall.
It's okay. Deliberate, don't incarcerate work. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've done a lot of work around policing, and I hope to do more in the future as well.
Great. Thank you, Kaz. We're happy you're here with us. Jua'Chelle, you ready?
Okay, does my sound good this time? Can you guys
Still
hear me?
not great.
All right, you could try turning up.
Turn up your video. That might help. Now try.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
How about now? Is my sound okay? It's good now. All right. So hi everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties. But my name is Jua'Chelle. I live in Ypsilanti, and what kind of started my youth activism was because of poetry. When I started poetry, I was in middle school and I didn't really know what to do. But through different connections, I was able to be a part of the activist group that I am in now called Staying Power. And also working with girls group, I see Miss Kia Sweeney now, who has helped me in high school as well. Being part of girls group and being part of the other different programs that are along with girls group has also helped me with my passion of also helping others and people that are younger than me. So I think just like my community and finding connections has really helped spark my activism.
Fantastic. And similarly, we're really happy you're here. I think you maybe want to consider turning the video off, although I'm going to miss seeing your face, because it does, the sound is still breaking up just a little bit. Well, let's dive into our conversation, and I'm going to go off of the PowerPoint deck, and I encourage you all to move into speaker view, and then that way you'll hear and see also the person who's speaking. And we're going to begin with Dea. And Dea, one of the questions we've been asking throughout the Centering Justice series, which we've modified a little bit here, is what have you observed through the COVID-19 pandemic and now through the movement for Black Lives that will and must transform us? What connections are you noticing between the pandemic and the movement? Dea, that question is for you, and then we'll move to Kaz.
Well, for me, like, since they got us like on quarantine, I noticed that everyone has the same 24 hours, which, however, like the inequalities within society hinder some, primarily minority and inner city communities, due to systematically underfunded and racism within this country. So with COVID-19 from the start, we see this with the availability of supplies such as masks and testing units and test availability in general, and going on to see how important it is to have multiple streams of income. Being your own boss and your own entrepreneur and your own business is important, definitely within the Black community. We see the creativity and the flexibility of Black communities through social media every day, whether it's a funny joke or a new dance craze that went viral. Just being creative. And sadly, we even saw the video of George Floyd dying due to racism of police. And a counterfeit 20 should not be the reason why someone should be on their deathbed. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. You know, when we were, I just want to lift up briefly what you said that I don't want to have missed, and that is entrepreneurship as a tool for social justice, right? And so you had shared with us that you've started since you've been home, and you're a student at Michigan State, right? A rising sophomore, junior?
A rising senior, yes.
Rising senior, that you have begun to use this as an opportunity to define or to identify entrepreneurial opportunities for yourself, right? To
yes.
And maybe a shifting away from looking for a job necessarily, yeah?
Yeah, like I'm seeing the value in just being your own boss, having your own revenue of income. Definitely due to, you know, people getting laid off. I lost my internship, so that was pretty tough for me. So just, you know, yeah, go green. But yeah, you know, keeping it up and just keeping spirits high. You know, Black businesses is important, definitely to the Black community. So just supporting Black businesses and
I
keeping
really
that.
appreciate you saying that. Yeah. Economic empowerment is a tool of social justice. Thank you, Dea. And we're going to come back to you. Let me move to Kaz. Kaz, again, this question, what have you observed, and it's in the chat as well, through COVID-19 and through the movement for Black Lives that will and must transform us? And what are the connections you're noticing between the pandemic and the movement?
So first, I'd say that things that need to change, that must transform us, is that we have to be able to have open and uncomfortable conversations with an understanding that we are coming to the table with people who have different viewpoints than us, and our goal is to educate and to move forward. You know, the best way to show someone your point of view is to put them in your shoes. And unfortunately, people don't like that because it's a very, very uncomfortable place to be in. But that is the reality for African Americans in this country. And so I think that it is important to force out that uncomfortable feeling and bring into the light our systemic issues. I think that hopefully what comes out of this is at least the demilitarization of the police, as lately and really throughout all American history, Police forces have been used to intimidate and have been more of a security force for the rich and powerful, whether it be politicians, corporations. They've shown time and time again, property and the status quo are more important to them than human lives. I think that the argument that I hear a lot is that this is not the right way to protest, and some of the riots breaking out are an inappropriate response to what has been going on in the world and what has been going on with policing in America. And I think about how they called footballers who kneeled, they called them sons of bitches, pardon my language, and called them traitors. And so from my point of view, it comes down to the fact that there is no right way to protest against people who benefit from the status quo. And so they will never tell us there is a right way to protest and to make our voices heard when they themselves are benefiting off the systemic racism and systemic oppression. That's it.
I want to just offer one other thing that you said in our planning that I thought was powerful. You know, you mentioned that you become unemployed during this time, and while I have not become unemployed, I feel different being at home than the hustle bustle of going, you know, dropping my kid off and going to work. And you said that you had really intentionally used this time for self-reflection, and that it was in those moments when you could slow down a little bit and you could really take a look at not just like navigating in the system, but sit back for a moment and look at the connection between the pen. Do you want to speak to that at all? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that, you know, a lot of people, before I'm about to go to college. I'm about to be attending Western this fall. And, you know, I've heard from a lot of people, take a gap year, take a gap year. Well, I didn't take a gap year, but I suppose one has been offered to me, whether I like it or not. So I think that now is really a time that a lot of people are taking to reflect. And it's true what they say about gap years, for sure, that when you have a lot of time to yourself and to really think about your actions and who you are in society, and what role you play, what role you want to play, and whether or not you are fulfilling that role is really important. And I think that a lot of times people are too stuck in daily routines to take a moment and think about and reflect on, you know, how we want to move forward with our lives, what we want to do, what kinds of things we want to achieve. You know, how can we be the most productive person we can be while we are on this planet, you know? And for me, and I know for a lot of people sat back and realized that, well, I don't want to work for somebody for the rest of my life. I don't want to just accept things as they are. And so it's important to, when you see a problem, to call out that problem and bring it to the light and fix it and move on. And so the problem that we have now is that people who have more of a progressive mindset are always in conflict with people who want to preserve what was, not understanding that just because our technology is advancing does not mean that we as a species are advancing at the same rate. And I think that people get those mixed up very often.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say on that.
Well, you've been dropping some bombs and some pearls, so thank you for what you have said, and we'll get you back in. Let me move now to Mia. And Mia, a reminder, the question, what have you observed through the pandemic, through the movement that we've been seeing, the uprisings that must transform us? And what connections are you making between the pandemic and the movement?
So I was thinking about with school, how it went from before, if somebody sneezed or coughed, over it's kind of just a simple like bless you or offering them a piece of tissue, to now if somebody sneezes or coughs, now you think that they're a potential threat.
True.
And it was even more interesting because people, I have Asian friends, and it went from, oh, do you want, okay, are you gonna sit with us at lunch? Yes or no, to, well, if you're friends with them, we can't be friends with you because you could get us sick.
Mm.
And that kind of hurt me because knowing that some people felt that way was kind of offensive, because the way that people assume certain things with race, like how like how right now they're assuming corona with Asians, and how like before they were assuming black people with Ebola,
Oh,
and
no.
kind of hurtful. And then when you think it back on what I said, when you say you can't really tell somebody how to protest, I was thinking about how people are like, we should peacefully protest or whatever, and I have no hate to that. But with the thing with police officers and they constantly killing black people for really sad reasons, it's like if somebody hit you and you told them, hey, stop, or if you gave them that warning, but they continue hitting you, and after one point you're gonna snap. Same thing with protesting, or you can only peacefully protest for so long before things increase.
You are so brilliant. You know that? You're just so brilliant, Mia. Um, there's a connection between what Kaz said, that this idea of systems at play, and Mia, when we were planning, you talked about having family in Chicago. And do you want to share that story just briefly? You mentioned some concerns about that I think are important.
So with let's talk about resources when we said that. So I feel like people should only do what they feel is necessary instead of taking advantage of the situation. So they people started, I understand the protests, but people started looting over because they're taking advantage of the situation that problems are already happening. But they they're doing this, and they're doing it to like grocery stores now, and that's hurting their own community, because I understand with situations like them burning the police station now, but within the grocery stores, for especially in places with like large communities like Chicago, you are now destroying that grocery store, and having it hurts me because having family in Chicago, especially a lot of grandparents, over now, if they want to go to the grocery store over grab things that they need to survive, now they can't because the places in which they need to go to are now destroyed or shut down out of fear.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was a really important point, because too often, you know, this sense of community and the question of, well, why would people destroy anything in their community? But if you've not felt like you belong in that community, you may not have the same connection to that property, right? And this idea of forgetting how systems of oppression, which make people feel like they don't belong, are present when there is the destruction of property in communities where we think they do belong. Yeah.
Can I speak to that as well?
Absolutely.
Just like jumping off of that, it's like a nice quote that I've always, I put it in a poem. So I put this quote in a poem before, for Brave New Voices, and it's Martin Luther King says, "A riot is the language of the unheard." And from that, like, I pretty much take away, like, looting is some people's ways of protest, and the focus should be on Black Lives Mattering in the country, not the materials that are lost. And huge corporations have insurance and are able to replace items, but Black lives cannot be replaced. So that's what I'm seeing a lot of, like, the people that are going out and looting, that's what their stance is. That's what I'm seeing on social media. So there are many different races outside of the Black community that are looting, protesting, organizing, signing pensions. Even other countries are protesting in the name of Black Lives Matter. So George Floyd and Breonna Taylor did not deserve their lives to be taken away by the hands of police. So I just feel like, you know, the focus should be on that.
Thank you. Thank you, dear. Powerful words. Let me move to Miguel. Miguel, same question, and I'll just briefly restate it. What have you observed through the pandemic and through the movement for Black lives that will and must transform us? And what connections are you noticing between the pandemic and the uprising?
Yeah, I think the thought that is always on my mind and has been on my mind for a long time is just how fundamentally cruel it is to have to protest in the street for our lives during a pandemic. And, you know, just the constant influx of seeing police outfitted in camo walking down our streets with, you know, the top military tech we have to offer. And I'm donating to my friend's mother's GoFundMe so she can have, you know, protective equipment at her job in a hospital. And I'm thinking about how the system has never been set up for us to even survive, much less thrive. And how we keep seeing in our police department that incremental change frankly doesn't work. In Ferguson, the rhetoric was, we need body cameras. And as soon as we have body cameras on police will be held accountable and Black people will stop dying. And what we've seen is police officers covering up their body cams as they go into protests so that they can, you know, escape that accountability. And I'm thinking about how, if there's any proof, if there's any takeaway from this movement and this pandemic, it's that incremental change to our systems does not work. And that racism is so rooted in almost every part of American life that to say we just need incremental small changes to our system in order to protect Black lives is a lie. If we can't trust the police, why should we trust the EMTs? Why should we trust our doctors? Medical racism is killing Black people at exorbitant rates. The pandemic is disproportionately affecting our low income and our Black communities. And I don't think it's an accident that as soon as we just learn more about the virus and how it affects Black people, that we're starting to talk about states opening up. And we're starting to talk about going back to our way of life. As soon as we've discovered that the lives on the front lines, the low income lives, your Uber Eats drivers, your Grubhub drivers, your nurses, the Black people that have been on the front lines of our society are most at risk, it's back to normal. It's back to let's go to the beaches. It's back to saving our summer. Yeah, if there's a takeaway I've gotten from these two events happening simultaneously, is that there is not a system in our country that is not infected by institutional racism, and that no incremental change will fix that. We need overarching change, overarching inventions, evolutions to the way our society operates if we're going to ever achieve any sort of sense of equality.
Yeah, I want to just uplift what you said again, that in the midst of a pandemic with a virus that is attacking our lungs, that people are marching their bodies in the street, being exposed to tear gas and other things that also impact not only just the risk of reinfection as well. And I know many of us that would like to be there, but can't, because we can't run the risk of exposure, right? Your words are so powerful, Miguel. Thank you for that. I want to get Jua'Chelle and Sunny's voice in as well. Jua'Chelle, are you with us? And again, a reminder, that prompt, what are you noticing with the pandemic, with the movement for Black lives that can and must transform?
All right. So I was thinking about trends that I noticed, and I noticed that like, people are making excuses of their lack of support. One example is that through COVID, I had to find another way with my program called Young Women for Change to continue to support our social justice presentation or project this year. And although we weren't able to meet with the sixth graders, we were able to help them create a booklet, a mental health booklet for them during these times. And also with the Black Lives Matter movement, for me, you know, my family doesn't want me out protesting, but I'm finding other ways, signing petitions, doing research in other organizations, sharing that, and using my social media to spread word of that. So I feel like during this time, people don't really understand how quickly their silence can be, and I feel like people should just use their voice in any shape, way, or form to help with both of these pandemics, this racial one and a virus. And I just feel like as though, you know, it is a critical time for a lot of us, and many of us can't do the things that we wish we can during this time. But I feel like anyway, there's many ways that people can help out. And like in the beginning of the pandemic, there were many outlets. I saw that there were many food shelters and that Ypsilanti and Lincoln were passing out lunches and snacks. But I don't want that to end. So I think during both of these times, I feel like these resources and the ways that people are helping now should remain during both, you know, COVID and this race for racial justice. If that was all heard, I'm finished.
Thanks, Jua'Chelle. One of the things that you'd mentioned, and I just, again, want to make sure that folks who are listening heard, because we had a little bit of challenge with your sound again, is a real concern about, and we heard this from Daryl Johnson, who's the CEO of Mentor to Youth in our very first session. And Daryl said, why is it that suddenly we can get this resource flow into the community with ease, whether that was food or other resources that were needed? And he asked it as more of an existential question. He asked it to challenge us, like, why now could we have done that when so many have gone without? And you made a similar comment in terms of a concern that the resource flow would shift or change, and that as moratoriums are lifted, as food distribution sites are winding down, as other resources are being scaled back, what might the implications of that be, right? And I thought that was really important. Sunny, we're gonna come on over to you now, joining us all the way from Korea. We are so grateful, because I think it's like the middle of the night, right, Sunny?
It's almost 2 a.m. here.
So it's the break of dawn. Answer that question for us. You know, what have you observed through COVID-19 and through the movement? Yeah.
Yeah, so I really wanted to talk about what really happened at our school, first of all, and me being an Asian during the pandemic, and what accomplishments some youth have been making, and how the pandemic really have been impacting teens in general. So starting off with my school and a little background about myself. So my family is like totally new to the States. We just moved here like 2 years ago. And so this whole environment was totally new to me and my family. So I obviously had expectations to be treated equally and to be really included into the whole environment. But since Saline High School, my high school, is almost 89% white, there are students that would make racist jokes, and students were quite like they were like, no one really wanted to speak out because we were all really scared to speak out at first, and it was really normalized, the whole racist jokes. And so even some adults or staff members couldn't speak out for us. And some students, and including myself, we were like constrained to laugh at these jokes when we all knew that we were all very uncomfortable and these jokes were unwholesome. So one of my friends in the organization that I'm currently in, Society for Student Resistance, his name is Drew Campbell. He once left a really powerful quote that said, "From all the people who believe in change to all the people that don't, you're outnumbered." And it's true. It's really true. And that quote really, I feel like it motivated our whole school and our organization to really keep it going. And I also know this really powerful quote from Price. She once said that accomplishments don't have color, which I also really, and that quote really inspired me. So about me being Asian during this pandemic. So I am South Korean, and once the COVID-19 reached the States, me and my other Asian friends, we totally felt the difference. And although I am Korean, I was identified as Chinese no matter what I said. So my Asian friend once asked me if this is ever going to end, this meaning racism. And I told her that some people don't realize that this must end, instead of thinking that, will this even end? Watching the news on media about George Floyd also, the next day I saw that news on media. I saw Blackout Tuesdays on social media, and I saw social media posts sharing awareness, and people were texting me. Some people were texting me that they were tired of seeing these posts on social media. So I also really felt like some did not realize how tiring it is for people who are experiencing racism.
Mm-hmm.
And that really, it was heartbreaking to see those texts. And they were also saying that officers must be respected, and they should be respected of what they are doing, and we should be thankful. But I saw this one post on social media that said if there were 999 police officers that were kind and nice, and if one was bad, if none of those 999 police officers reported the one bad officer, we have 1,000 bad officers. And
come on now, Sunny.
I felt like that was a really powerful message in this pandemic, and it is, hurtful to see these respectful officers hold power against us, and we should be the ones being protected from them. So taking a little more about COVID-19, my parents are medical doctors, and they have been struggling through hard work. And actually, my friend in Korea, she struggled through the horrible virus. And so that really motivated me to join a COVID-19 youth task force. So it's a group of youth trying to help other youth groups in the age range of elementary school to even college students. So we have care kits, mental health days, and we have those mental health days because we realize that a lot of youth is struggling mentally. We have Care Kit from where teens or youth could ask like for everything they need. For example, like shampoos, like really anything. And once they request it, we mail it to their house. And we've been doing fundraising for those care kits. So it really made me realize how people were impacted from this pandemic. Food shortage, being unemployed, and being impacted like so much mentally and in our hearts. So that's like everything I wanted to really get out. Yeah, thank you.
So many powerful things, Sunny, that to latch on to there. One in particular that you bring up that we've been holding in our Champions for Change program. So I think you know that new host a program with leaders of color, Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, and then a companion fellowship for white allies. And within our Leaders of Color Fellowship, we've talked a lot about what solidarity across communities of color looks like. So I just wanted to name that the work that you and other non-Black students of color did in Saline when Cabo was called the N-word are really a model for us of what we can do across communities of color. And for me, when we kicked off the Centering Justice series, we brought at least one person who identified as Asian into that conversation to be in solidarity with them as we were seeing anti-Asian xenophobia, and to really grapple with how do we, those of us who have experienced forms of oppression and racism, just like you did when you got to Saline, to be called Chinese and not Korean, to be alienated because of your identity, or even what Mia said about, you know, this idea that we automatically associate the virus with people of Asian descent. Like so the solidarity piece, I'm sorry, and I lost my train of thought there. Oh, the activism, the work that you all had done. The other thing that you brought up that I thought was really important, and we heard about this in our last session with people who were leading direct service organizations or working in them, and that was because we have not really worked with young people to help think about healthful responses to the virus with them. They're, you know, young people are longing for connection, right? For opportunities to, they miss being at school with one another, being together. And some, as we learned a couple weeks ago, are taking risky steps. And so in your advocacy work, particularly around these care kits, you're offering up an opportunity and awareness about the impact of the disease. You help us to make sure that young people do in fact understand that we're still in a pandemic, right? And thank you to your parents, who it sounds like are working at the front lines of that. No, thank you. Do you want to say anything more about like when you have felt connected, as we're talking about alternative ways to being connected in person, but also solidarity as a means of connection? Would you like to say anything about that?
Being connected like to one another.
Yeah. How are you doing that?
Well, as a teen, it is, I mean, it's obvious that we want to go out and really meet our friends and socialize, but it's really hard for us to always stay on Zoom or, you know, these devices every day, just like we're in person, because now we really maybe are kind of lazy, but also I feel like we try to isolate ourselves. Like a lot of teens try to isolate themselves from these devices now and their friends, and I feel like that's the reason that we have these mental health days. But the ways I connect to one another, since many of my friends have a hard time using these devices now, my friend and I, we actually wrote like hand letters to each other and we sent them through the mail. And I feel like that's a special connection. I feel like it really depends on the person you're trying to connect to, but I feel like it's it's a good idea to write hand letters and really, yeah, stay in touch.
Yeah, so that's awesome. Finding alternative ways to connect with each other, but not losing the connections, right? So I'm going to open it up to all of the panelists. And if you've not noticed, and if you want to go back onto the gallery view, y'all, you should be able to see a set of collective invitations and demands that our panelists today shared with us. And while you are viewing those, I just want to invite if there's anything else that they would like to share with you, and then we want to give you a chance to answer any questions. Or ask any questions, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
so, yeah, please.
I just want to touch on the third bullet point, which is learn from our history. When police kill a Black man, we have a script. What is our script in the face of a pandemic? I think it's really important to think about how many Black people were dying before the video of George Floyd was released. How many Black communities were suffering and in pain before the George Floyd video was released, and then also to look inward and say, what was I doing to help those communities before social media blew up with Black Lives Matter, before I saw the video, before I saw the looters? What was I doing to help these communities in pain, you know, when it wasn't the headline news every night? And then use those thoughts to then think the next thought, which is, what will I do when CNN goes back to normal? What will I do when I can turn on Rachel Maddow at night and she's not talking about Minneapolis? How will I continue to support Black communities when it's not the most sensationalized piece of news going on right now? And if I were to demand anything from my community, it would be to continue to support, continue to uplift Black voices, even when the larger media and the larger society doesn't. It's much harder to be anti-racist when racism isn't, you know, the leading conversation. But Black communities are always thinking about racism and are always thinking about their lives being at risk from police. And I ask that you, like somebody just said in the chat, don't go back to normal. Continue to do the work that you're doing now. Continue to support the people who are doing the work that's happening right now. Don't let this fight end. As Sunny said, racism needs to end. We need to fundamentally change our institutions, and that won't happen slowly over time.
Let me ask you a question, Miguel. I got a call from somebody today, kind of a call to action. So there's some momentum around this movement to defund, Kaz brought it up, to defund police or to demilitarize police or to abolish police. And I got a call from someone kind of urgently saying, you know, that movement is going to be co-opted by white people really quickly. What are Black leaders doing? And actually, Sunny, this is what I was thinking about when I sort of lost my train of thought, is when we're already fatigued and already tired, right? And already holding so much, because it was Sunny and other Celine students that ran to, they were at every meeting and at every board meeting. And I mean, these are, you know, young folk, right? Like, that are in school and doing what have you. And similarly, right now, I'm trying to raise my kid and stay alive and run an organization. What advice do you have for, particularly for white folks, but in general, like, how do we make sure that these movements that you're talking about, right, that we don't forget about, how do we make sure that those are also continue to be led by and supported by, led by Black and other people of color, but supported by white brothers and sisters? Do you have any advice for us on that?
Yeah, specifically, I guess my advice to white allies is to not get caught up in the hype. It is easy, you know, the way our media works, a couple different resources, a couple different organizations get a lot of attention. My advice would be to not get caught up in that. Do your research, spend a little time, figure out what organizations, New is an incredible one, but what other organizations in the community have been supporting the community before, you know, media camera crews were on your streets. And it doesn't have to be super complicated, you know what I mean? Find the dance studio that gives out free lessons in poor communities. Like, it can be the small things, but you know, don't get caught up in the hype. Figure out who's been working, who's been doing the ground level activism, long before the pandemic hit, because those will be the people who are doing that work long after the pandemic goes away. And so how to continue that fight, it's to how do you support organizations in the long run? How do you support your community in the long run? And changing, fundamentally the way you think about the world around you. I think for white people, it's very easy to go through your life enjoying the institutions that America gives you without ever thinking about how those institutions could be hurting your community. If you're white, you can have amazing run-ins with the same police officers who I will have horrible interactions with. And it's understanding that the same institutions that support you, the same institutions that can hold up your life, can be systematically destroying our communities. And that just because, the police responds to your call, your 911 call real fast in your white suburb, doesn't mean that police system doesn't need to change. It doesn't mean that we have to hold that police system accountable for everything that they're doing.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I want to make sure, especially because she had some tech issues. So Jua'Chelle in the chat just said, in terms of this fourth bullet item on our list of demands or invitations, as she said, we all have some type of platform for helping out, donating, signing petitions, protesting. Those are all ways we can help. We shouldn't stop once everyone is, we shouldn't stop. We should keep going, because Black and brown communities will always be at risk until we change the ways of our system. So thank you for that. I do want to, was there someone?
Yeah, Kaz had popped something in the chat, and I just want to give him an opportunity to respond.
Yeah. Kaz, do you want to say that, or you want me to read it for you, dear?
I can go ahead and say it. I have
please.
some other stuff to add on to that. I was just kind of answering some stuff in the chat, but so yeah, I think there's a concern within the Black community that once things start going back to normal, once we start going back to work, things are starting to open up, that this is going to be forgotten about again. Because for me, when this uptick began and when I saw these protests erupting, I thought back to Charlottesville, and how police officers were feet away from white supremacists beating up counter protesters, and there were white, Black, Latino police officers, and they just stood there and did nothing. And there's this culture of abusing the powers that are given to us within every institution, and that does not exclude the police. But I think that a lot of African Americans right now are scared that where will this movement be in a month? And I had this fear. I know personally that when we had all heard that all 4 officers were being charged, and all 4 officers were in custody, that I had this sudden fear that and so that's I think a real fear within the Black community and within all communities that be that from an economic point of view or a racial point of view or a religious point of view. And I mean, because we see how easily normalized these issues are for us, where we've had people down at the border in camps with very little security, basically no security at all. And we've just accepted that as the norm and moved on with our lives. And so I think that getting used to a routine in your daily life is very, very dangerous, because that is somewhat of a it melts you into the system. It melts you into this system, as if I'm trying to think of a good analogy. For instance, molten metal. Metal is hard and metal is strong, but when it is heated up and put through a machine, you can shape it to be whatever you want. you know? And I think that we are too often too focused on the wrong thing, and that is that we are so used to being on one track, on one um, kind of I'm failing to think about this stuff. It's getting real hot in my room.
It's
But
okay. Well, I can mention something that you bring up that you said that reminds me of work I've done is this idea of like a conveyor belt, right? If you think of the
yeah,
conveyor belt at the airport, and we're all just kind of, on that belt, right?
mhm,
And in some ways, just riding along that belt makes us complicit in these systems, right?
yeah,
And you might be on the part that's walking, or you might be on the part that's running, right? But it doesn't really, there's no disruption unless you turn around on that conveyor belt, right?
right,
And
right.
go against. Is that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that kind of what I'm
No, no,
hearing?
yeah, because I
Yeah,
think that everyone has their own personal conveyor belt. As in, we all have our own goals in life. We all have things that we want to achieve in life, but it is within this structured system.
yes.
And so it is often hard for people to look outside the box and think outside the box.
Yeah.
As in, okay, what am I doing within this system that is helping others, achieve their own personal goals?
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, we have a very exclusionary society that we live in, and we have this culture of really just, I'm gonna mind my business. But unfortunately, when it comes to political issues, everyone has an opinion, and when it comes to human rights issues, everyone has a contradicting opinion.
Mhm.
Another thing I wanted to point out was what
Maybe
Mia
one
said.
more minute, okay, Cass?
Okay, yeah, sure. One thing I just wanted to point out real quick about what Mia said. She talked about rioting, and and that it does have a negative effect on the community that is rioting as well. But it was also, I think right now what people are struggling with is the fact that what is illegal is not necessarily, things are not necessarily illegal because they are wrong, because it was also illegal to sit in white bars and white restaurants, and it was illegal to sit on the front of the bus. It was illegal for Black people to vote, and so I think the conflict lies within lex naturalis, those being natural laws, and the status quo, and laws that uphold agendas. Um,
The
and I think there
legal
needs to
and the
be very,
moral.
yeah, there
Mhm.
needs to be a very clear line between what is a natural law as in a law, human rights, human rights law and political agendas should not mix. They should
Yeah,
not ever mix.
yeah, yeah.
I think
Thank
that
you.
human rights, yeah, need to
Please.
be just generally established.
Yeah. I swear I could listen to you, and actually would rather listen to you than the next meeting that many of us have to go to. But there have been a lot of comments in the chat box, not so much questions. So a reminder for folks on the call, we're going to send you this deck and the recording. And as we get ready to wrap up, if there are any questions for our panelists, you can certainly put those into the chat box. But I know I want to thank each of you personally for taking time to lend your voices. I didn't just hear you, I'm inspired by you. And I know that many people in our chat box are as well. We want to think about how to continue to loop your voices into our work. And so we'll be circling back to you. This is not a one and done. We're in the process of redefining, or at least establishing, what centering justice will look like going forward. To those of you who have joined us for the 5-part series, we hope that it has nourished you in the way that it has us, to hear from leaders of color throughout Washtenaw County. We hope that it has inspired you and challenged you and stretched you to grow, as it has for everyone on our team. We stand as an organization in solidarity with Black, Indigenous, and other people of color in this community, and we call upon our white brothers and sisters in this moment to join us in a shared liberation. I assert to you that the freedom that we are seeking is not exclusive to these communities. It is inclusive of all communities, that in a system of white supremacy and white dominance, certainly oppression affects some of us more than others, but all of us are affected in a system that doesn't value difference and that in fact encourages sameness and locks out whole swaths of people. So thank you for being on this now 2-month journey. Thank you to Ananya and to our team at NEW who have helped to make it happen. We certainly miss Melvin, but and want to credit his thought leadership in a lot of where we've gone. And we'll take a break, I think, over the summer and pick back up in late fall with Centering Justice and hopefully with each of you. So with that, we bid you safety, we bid you health, love, and liberation. Thanks for joining. And the Survey Monkey is there. Sorry, go ahead, Ananya.
Just want to offer a couple more thank yous. We at NEW haven't typically worked with young people before, and so we reached out to some of the adults on this call, including Kia Sweeney and Matt Hamilton and Jennifer Haynes. And so just wanted to appreciate those of you who knew of these amazing people that you heard speak today and who made the connection for us.
And Ananya, Jen brought a group on too that we want to shout out.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Do you remember who that is?
Jen was going to bring her Lit Circle on, and I think they didn't make it on. So.
Okay. Also, we mentioned them in our slide, but I want to explicitly say that at a time that was really challenging for NEW, in that we work in community with people in person. And so when the pandemic hit, most of our consulting and training either was postponed, canceled, or made virtual. And the folks at United Way, when I said, I really feel like we need to center the voices of people of color, got behind us and helped to underwrite the cost of putting this series on. So I want to explicitly thank our partners at United Way for Washtenaw County. And I want to encourage you to visit their website, uwwashtenaw.org. They're currently doing they just wrapped up, but it's still available, a 5-day equity challenge, which is really powerful and a great resource. And then also want to thank the folks over at the Ginsburg Center who, when we had overwhelming demand and requests to participate in these sessions, they gifted us a Zoom account that would allow us to have more people. So thank you to Sarah Saylor and to the folks at the Ginsburg Center. With that, I again want to thank you.
Yeah. And also, sometimes in the past when we've gone a little bit over time, if anyone feels moved to stay a little longer and you have questions, maybe some of the panelists could stick around for a couple of minutes too, in case anyone wants to offer questions.
Yeah, so we're at our 1:15 stop time right now, but we'll be happy to stay on if folks want to continue to gather and talk. And then Ananya, you'll send out this deck, right, for folks that have these resources and connections to the stuff the young people are doing.
Yeah.
Great. The chat box is really full. Let's take a look. Lots of thank yous. Yeah.
Thanks, Jua'Chelle.
So good to see folks on here. All right, I didn't see a ton of questions, so I'm gonna get the slide off, the slide deck. That always helps me to then be able to see the gallery view and who stuck around.
Does anyone who's still here want to ask a question? Is there anything more that you want to hear?
I'll chime in really quickly, but it's just more so thank you to everyone. And I know like we're at that time and past that time. One of the comments I had put in the chat box, I would just ask the young people to think about, I don't even know if you should respond right now, but I know that I've been having a lot of side conversations with some women of color, and they feel that sometimes they feel like it's a disparity around getting some of the injustices around women of color out into the media, and to get people to kind of rally behind some of the atrocities committed against women. And so it was something that's been on my heart and mind. I mean, obviously it doesn't matter which gender, because it's all horrific whenever there's injustices, but I just at least wanted to speak up for those people that feel that they're grateful that there is a large protest and movement in the country, because we did see a horrific murder committed on video, but people are just feeling like so much happens to women behind closed doors, especially women of color, and people are kind of grieving that there's also just hasn't been this space to really have that outpour of upset, frustration and anger and lividness that we are seeing in the country right now. So I just felt it on my spirit to at least say it. That's a loaded thing, and I know this is the end of this call, but I just wanted to acknowledge that people have brought that to my attention. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Kia. Thank you. I don't know if any of our youth leaders want to remark on that statement. You're welcome to.
I feel like it was well said. I too do agree with that, as far as when it comes to just like the big viral poof of people, coming out and acknowledging George Floyd's death, which was completely terrible. But, today is Breonna Taylor's birthday. And for those who don't know, that is also another victim that the Black Lives Matter movement is really like pushing a lot of steam behind to get justice for. And she was shot 8 times by police officers with a raid that they did on her home, which really the raid shouldn't even have been in her house to begin with, because she didn't have any drugs or anything in her home. So they didn't knock first. She had no idea what was going on. They pretty much just ran in and shot and killed her. So, I just feel like I agree with what Kia is saying as far as media coverage and yeah.
Thank you, Dea. I mean, Kia, it's such a, I can't help but say, and I think I might, no, maybe I'm pushing it. I was going to say I might be the elder Black woman on the call, but maybe not quite. Something that I have personally been dealing with is this myth of the Black superwoman, right?
Yes.
And I think part of what you're speaking to is the ways in which that gets systematized and institutionalized and mythologized, right? That we can't be, hurting, right? Because we carry the weight of the world on our back. And we certainly heard that last month when we were talking to Sharonda Simmons, who reminded us that many of the very Black women you look to as leaders in this community are themselves living on the edge of poverty, right? Are themselves caring for multiple people, multiple generations of people, or even children or loved ones, et cetera. So I think, what that illuminated for me and what my own kind of personal revolution is around saying that, right? Disrupt, and creating some space to nurture myself and to demand that of others. So that even now, when I know you and other Black women leaders in this community are being called to fix yet another thing, I'm like, hold up, I got to put my own oxygen mask on first, right?
Yeah. And I didn't want people to feel like it's a choice, because I don't think you have to choose like what issue is greatest. Right. Is it, Black men and how they're treated and over criminalized, and they are over criminalized, and that is just true across the board. But I do think that I just think that there is a population, and I do think it has something to do with that myth of like Superwoman, or even the Black Girl Magic. I love Black Girl Magic hashtag. But I do think it all contributes to this idea that some of the things that happen to women of color, and I mean of all ethnicities, I mean all around the country, there are horrific things happening to women of color all around the world that just does not make, it's kind of like a silent cry. And I'm really grateful that we are crying loud and boldly about what's happening, particularly around Black men in this country. And I am by no means, I don't want that to go away. It just made me realize that there are so many silent cries of women of color that are just not making it to the spotlight. So thank you all for letting me share that. And
Absolutely.
It looked like Miguel was trying to respond to that too earlier.
I was just going to say that we also need to hold our own community accountable for the way it uplifts the most marginalized voices among it. You know, I think part of the problem is outside media and just the story that the larger white America gets to grab onto and listen to, but there is definitely a responsibility in our community to uplift the voices of those who are most marginalized and who are most at risk. And I think too often, the names of Black women who are hurt by the institutions in America get lost. And that's, you know, it's not okay, that's not right, and it has to change. Not just in police, but in our medical system. I think about medical racism and how many Black women don't get the right treatment in hospitals and aren't listened to in hospitals. I think about, you know, almost every system in our country that is deeply racist and how we have to fight for change for all of us and have a nobody left behind mentality. And I think too often in learning from our history, that hasn't been the case. And that is one of the things that needs to change.
thank you for that.
Any other questions for our leaders here? Otherwise, I know I've got to scoot for another meeting, but we could continue. We've generally, Ananya, maybe till 1:30, like another 7 minutes or so, if folks want to,
If anyone else would like to offer a question
or comment.
or last words.
Thank you. Thank you all. I'm so grateful. And I think it takes vulnerability and courage and just, I just think young people, like the young panelists you all had, I just think you all are incredible. And I pray you all continue to use your voices. I think I'm just grateful to be in this space. So thank you all.
Yeah, Sunny, get some rest. Thank you. It means so much that you stayed up to be with us.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. So we'll be back in touch. Take care, everyone. Breathe. Be safe.
I just want to share one thing. Yeah. I really loved hearing from the young people today, and it was really inspiring also to hear from, like, we had some different varieties, college, high school, and middle school. Like, I think Mia's in middle school.
Yeah.
And, one of my closest friends is 11, and it just, like, really made me think of her, like, hearing from Mia, and just, you know, it made me ponder, like, well, what are spaces where she can be participating in this type of experience where there's, you know, and I think that previously, before hearing Mia's voice, like, that wasn't really something I was pondering. You know, it's more like, what literature can she read, or, you know, different things like that, or how can I support her in her journey? But I just felt so inspired by the gradients of the youth voice and this whole series and everything. It's just been really supportive and really appreciative. And thank you to the youth on this call especially.
Yeah. Bethany, we'll send you the recording and you could share that with your friend as well. And then if she's interested or has things to say, put us in touch with her. This is great. You all be well. Take care. Thank you again. Yeah. Right back at you, Kia. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.